Hi there. I'm Leolia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, today we're going to be discussing something that really concerns all of us. Everybody's involved. And my title is What It Takes to Keep Going. And I'm going to let you think about it as we talk about this and apply it to yourself. What keeps you going? And that is, not, I'm not talking about in the good times, because I know in the good times we're all fine with that. As long as everything's going the way we want it to go, we have no complaints. We're not worried. We're satisfied. But I'm not talking about the good time. I mean, in the hard times. And when I say hard times, I mean hard times. The times when the situations are bad, everything seems you just feel totally stressed out. You feel hopeless. You're wasting. Why am I doing this? What is the point? You're upset. You may be angry. Of course, you're disappointed. You may be disappointed in people who didn't live up to what they said they were going to do, and now you just, how you say, I quit. I'm just done. You just want to throw your hands up and say, you know what? I'm finished. I just can't do this anymore. And I feel that way sometimes myself. That applies to everybody. Everybody can get that feeling, especially when you're having hardships. Because hardships we don't understand. We spoke about that before. Why me? We said, why me, God? Because it's your turn. But the point is, what do you do? And four things came to my mind. And the first thing was, well, first of all, we have to know what to do. So that means we need wisdom. And then the second thing we need is, where do I go? How do I go about it? So now we need direction, right? And then most of all, we need strength, but courage. You got to be courageous. You got to be willing to take that chance. And without these four things, wisdom, direction, strength, and courage, without those four things, there is no going forward. You're either going to stay stuck where you are or think about the past. And thinking about either one of those are no good choices, because neither one of them will bring you forward. And the whole point of your life, God's plan is for you to go forward, not to be stuck and not to go backwards. So today we're going to be talking about, I'm going to talk about Apostle Paul, because he had a very, very stressful life. And we're going to be reading from Second Timothy and Second Corinthians, because we're going to see they're both letters, but the first letter is the letter he wrote to his son Timothy. And that's what we're going to see that in the book of Timothy. But the second letter he wrote was to the people of Corinth, the Corinthian people. But the letters were very similar because they were talking about what to do in stressful times. He's giving them words of encouragement. Don't forget what I've taught you. He's telling his son Timothy, continue where I left off. Don't forget, Paul's now in jail. He's in jail. They threw him in jail for what he was preaching. So he's in jail, but look, he's still encouraging them on the outside to trust in God. Trust in him for all your needs, no matter what. And that's what we're going to learn today, what he told his son and the Corinthians. So we're going to start in 2 Timothy chapter 4. And we're going to start in verse 2. But these are the words of encouragement that Paul wrote to his son, encouraging him to stay strong. No matter what the situation, whatever's going on with you, stay strong. And this is what he wrote in his letter. He told him, chapter 4, 2 Timothy, verse 2, he said, preach the word, be instant in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Now I'm going to stop right there because that one verse told him so much to do. Told him so much to do. He said, preach in season or out. Well, we know what seasons are. We have seasons, summer, fall, winter, spring. And what do? We adapt to each season as it comes. And this is what he's telling him, no matter what season it is. What do? Summertime, we turn on the air. Wintertime, we turn on the heat. Summertime, we eat fruit and fresh veggies. And wintertime, we're in the house cooking. And, so we adapt our clothing. Summertime, we wear a little bit. Wintertime, we wear a whole lot. So that's adapting to our life seasons. He's telling them adapt to the different seasons of life, meaning the hard times as well as the good times. So we don't have a problem adapting to the good times. Why? Because they're good times. But adapting to the trials, the tribulation, that's where the problem comes in season or out of season. So that means here, good times or bad times. And it says reprove and rebuke. Well, to reprove means to scold, to reprimand. And that means when you're preaching, if people aren't doing what they're supposed to, you let them know. And to rebuke means disapproval. So you let them know God's disapproving of what you're doing. They're doing what they feel like doing. And to exhort means to urge them strongly to change your ways. Come back to what you were. Don't be listening to those other voices. We spoke about other voices. He says where he was saying about long suffering and doctrine. That means long suffering means patiently enduring a hardship. And sometimes our hardships are way longer than we would like, even the short ones. But sometimes God does things for a reason. And it's either to make you stronger, to teach you something. And that's why we always have to say when stuff isn't going right. And a lot of times I think, well, what is it that God is trying to get me to see? What am I missing? And a lot of times I feel like I'm missing a point. I can feel like I just feel like I am. I'm not getting it. And that's what it is. That's what long suffering is. Patience. And I keep saying, what is it that I'm missing? And then finally you get an answer. But the point is, it says patiently enduring. And patience is something that we have very little of. And sound doctrine, let's see, for time, verse 3, for the time will come when people aren't going to endure sound doctrine. They're just not going to listen. And that's today. They're not listening. Sound means without error. Sound means with flawless. So that only can mean the Bible. This is our sound doctrine. No mistakes in here. If you don't listen to other voices and you read the word, there is no mistake. There's not a mistake in the Bible. It is flawless. This is sound doctrine. It says, but they want to go after their own lusts. And what did we say lust was? We said it was an insatiable, well, I'll say intense desire or a need. Oh, I just got to have this. And the drug addicts. That's an example. People that want money, they lust after money, population, popularity, make a name for yourself, be a big somebody. That's a lust. Anything you're craving outside of God is a lust. And you see it in our everyday lives. Everybody wants to be somebody. Everybody's on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Well, I am too, but the point is, it depends on your motives. Why are you doing it? So you can't do stuff because you want to and then pray for the strength to keep going. That's not going to happen, because now you're trying to pray for something that you want without asking God what he wants. And it's all about what he wants. And it says, but they shall, and they're going to turn their ears away from the truth and be turned unto fables. So they're going to ignore what you're saying, ignore what you're preaching about, ignore what your readings that you tell them about. Why? Because they want to hear what they want to hear. And what are fables? We said they were fairy tales. They call them fictitious statements, which they are. They're not truths. They're things that people make up and tell you just to get you to believe what they're believing in. And that's what they did back then. And guess what? They're doing it today. We see it every day on the news. How many times somebody gets up and says something about the other person and it ain't true. They don't have nothing to back it up, but they're just talking about it anyway, making it like it is true. And we see that every single day. It says, but watch all things, endure afflictions. Afflictions means suffering. So sometimes you got to endure bad things for a while. Do the work of an evangelist and make proof of thy ministry. So you have proof. This is your proof right here. This is your proof. You don't have to make up anything, because this is factual. And Paul is telling his son, he says, I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. Because they wanted to kill Paul. He's in jail. They wanted to kill Paul because of his preachings. He was telling them about the Lord. They were beginning to listen to him. They were following him, and then they threw him in jail because he was talking against what they were trying to get him to believe. And that's what I'm talking about. And we have that today. And in verse 7, he said, I fought a good fight. I fought a good fight. I finished my course. I have kept the faith. I have kept it. And that's what you have to do. You can't say, oh, I know this is right and I believe this, and then go off and listen to somebody else. So now you're just turning your faith over to somebody else. You're just quitting the truth for something that somebody made up. And why? What motivated Paul to continue, even under his harsh circumstances? His faith, his awareness. When you have faith, you just have a feel of you're covered. I've had that kind of feeling on occasion, and it's a comfort feeling. It's like, okay, everything's going to be all right. Everything will be fine. All his letters keep reminding them and him, his son, and the Corinthians, that God is always with you. Always. Now, let me ask you something. Do you believe when we use the verse that says, God said, I will never leave you or forsake you? Do you really believe it? That's what the whole thing is about. Belief. And especially when you're thinking about giving up. And I do. That pops in my head a lot, because a lot of times I second guess myself and I question myself. And then, like I say, it's like, what are you trying to tell me? Or am I missing something? I'm acting that way because I'm second guessing myself. And it's not necessary. But see, that's the devil trying to change your mind. And sometimes we do, so you just feel so tired and so exhausted. And sometimes we feel so weak. And I spoke about weak and weary. Weary is weary. Weary is just tired. We're not weak. And then I refresh myself. You're not weak. You're just weary. Give yourself a break. Sometimes you do feel forgotten. And sometimes we give up right before our breakthrough or right before the opportunity is to come. And even in jail, Paul was still praising God. And this is again where you got to have patience. I mean, if you don't trust him, what are you going to do? There is nobody else you can trust for what you need. Then you've got to learn to wait on his timing. It's all about timing, trust, belief, confidence. What did I tell you about my TKO last week? What did I say it was? Trusting in God, knowing God, and obeying God. TKO. That's my advice to you. And Paul tells, all about the strength. He talks about the strength that God gave him to survive through all the stuff that he's going through. And he's telling his son, you've got to do the same thing. Now let's go to Second Corinthians, because this is when the letter, I should say, he sent to the Corinthians. And it was very similar to the one he sent to Paul, but it was for them, whereas he was talking to his son Timothy in the other letter. And so this is the letter that he had sent to the Corinthians. So let's go to Second Corinthians chapter 11 and we're going to start in verse 23. Verse 23 is going to talk about what he's telling them. He was saying he worked harder than most people all the time. It says, and in stripes above measure. That means he was whipped more than anybody else. And we're going to read it right out of chapter, Second Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23. He says, in labor more than abundant, in stripes, meaning whips, and that means lashes. How many lashes? In stripes above measure, that above that, because nobody else has ever been whipped in 5 different occasions and 40 lashes. He says in prisons more frequent and closer to death more often. He said, even of the Jews, 5 times I received 40 lashes. 5 times. Then I was once beaten with rods. Once he was stoned. 3 times he suffered a shipwreck, a night and a day in the deep. That means out in the water, in the dark, night and day. And even when he was journeying, when he was just walking, crossing the desert or going from one city to another, he said, even then, in perils. And what's a peril? That's an exposure to risk and danger. So he was always under danger and risk wherever he went, whether it was, like he said, whether it was in the water. Well, he said he was shipwrecked 3 times. Whether it was by robbers, so that could be on the land, in the water, wherever, by his own countrymen. So his own people were even robbing him and berating him and talking him down. And by the heathens, well, those are the non-believers. We have a lot of them nowadays too. And in perils in the city and perils in the wilderness. So that meant no matter where he was always fighting off something or somebody in the sea and among the false brethren. Now, those could have been his own countrymen or not, but they were acting like, oh, that's my brother, that's my buddy, I'll look out for him. They didn't. They turned their back on him. What do we call them? The backstabbers. We have them. We all know about backstabbers. And he said, in weariness and painfulness, in hunger and thirst. Half the time he didn't even have anything to eat. He would be fasting often. He was in cold and half didn't have anything to wear half of the time. So these are all the hardships that he encountered. But it's all through this, he was still praising and trusting God. And you know what? Praying continually to get from one day to the next. And those days were much bigger or hardships than what we have today. We haven't been in the desert and out on the ocean for 2 and 3 days by yourself and people robbing you every time you turn around. I mean, of course, we have plenty of robberies going on. We have plenty of that kind of stuff. But at least you got a policeman to call or somebody to call. He had nothing. He was hungry half of the time. Let me ask you something. Do you think you could have survived all that stuff? Everything he withstood, I couldn't survive any of it. So I'm not even, you don't even have to think about that. But I don't think that's something that those type of hardships, you've got to have faith in God because can't nothing else pull you through all that. There's no way. There is no way. And the reason he did was because he had the faith, the trust, and the belief and patience to wait on God. And God brought him through all that stuff, all that torture, all that hardship. And he prayed continually. Well, because God's the only one that can give you that kind of stuff. Nobody else could give you strength. Nobody else could save you. That's the only, nobody can do what God can do, period. And I always, you ever think about this saying, uh, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me because nobody else can. Nobody else can. And I believe these words he said, I believe he would say that kind of stuff to himself daily to encourage himself. And that's what we have to learn to do, encourage ourselves. We depend too much on other people for our strength, giving you encourage. People don't encourage you because they don't know you. Maybe on TikTok or somewhere there. Oh yeah, yeah, we like that. We like that. But guess what? That's short lived. You're not going to be top dog on TikTok 5 years from now or 5 months for all you know. There's always somebody else on TikTok. That's no way to be encouraged. But he always felt the presence of God, and that's what it takes. He always felt like he was surrounded by God. And that's the same kind of strength we need to be given. But we have to learn to recognize it and acknowledge it. God's with us every day, all the time. We don't feel it all the time, but you got to repeat to yourself. You've got to encourage yourself and have your daily prayer, have your daily conversation, make your requests known to God. But finally, you got to thank him for what he's already given you. I mean, you wouldn't be here today if he hadn't given you the strength to wake up. If he didn't wake you up, you wouldn't be here. Who else would you be thanking for that? Nobody. Nobody. But I have something I want to share with you. Now, here it is. This is what we call a poetry journal. And whoops, am I holding it right? Let me hold it this way. Whoops, there we go. And it's called Everyday Miracles. And it was written by myself and my daughter out of North Carolina, Pastor Denise Marshall. And it's actually an actual journal, and it features inspirational pictures. And every month, we have a picture, a beautiful picture that she put on there. And then we have a poem for every month of the year. And it also has, it actually has spaces, lines where you can actually journal, write down what happened to you that day. So each month, as you read the poem in the front of each month, and then you have she has actual verses for every day of the month. So then you could say, whatever took place for you today, write your blessings. Um, and that's how you suppose you something wonderful happened to you today. And 6 months from now, you say, yeah, I remember. Let me look back, and I know it was something that happened. You can go right back in your journal and look and see what it was. And it is available on Amazon. Yeah, and it's called Everyday Miracles. But what I wanted to do today was to share one of the poems with you from our journal. She wrote 6 poems, and I wrote 6 poems, and they're all original, and they're all in our journal, Everyday Miracles. But I selected, this is the poem that I wrote for the month of November. And I particularly selected it because it's called Grateful. And I used it for November because of Thanksgiving. So I want to share that with you. And it's called Grateful. And let me just go right here. I took it out and tell me, I hope it makes you grateful. Did you ever take time to think about what you should be grateful for? What the Heavenly Father has done for you? And the things we tend to ignore? The things we take for granted as we go through each and every day. Sometimes we seem so busy to even stop and pray. We're rushing here and rushing there, busy schedules we're trying to keep. We need our eyes to see our way. For our balance, we need our feet. We have so many attributes that we use every day. So don't tell me you don't have time to raise your hands and pray. I could list at least 20 things you should be grateful for. So let's just use one and raise our voice in praise to our Almighty Lord. Yeah, we got to learn to be grateful for what we have and not keep asking for more and more. This is Thanksgiving. That's why I wrote that for November. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can relate to it, and I hope you remember it. Remember some of those words. Just take time out. You need our eyes to see and our feet for our balance. Where we get that from? Stuff we take for granted. We take too much for granted, I think. So, with that said, I just want you to think about everything we talked about today, and think about what it takes for you to go forward, and then think about what it needed for you to go forward. Makes a difference, because we all need wisdom, we all need guidance, we all need strength, and we all need courage. And we all know we can only get that from one place. And my closing words for today are: winners never quit, but quitters never win. Which one do you want to be? Until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.